Hi, it's Degenerate Jay.
With a throat problem, apparently.
Yep, I got my tonsils out. Now I'm a woman.
Nate knows all about throat problems from me. Also, that is not how becoming a woman works. You don't just get your tonsils out and you're a woman.
No, that's how you get a womanly voice.
You need to actually go and maybe take a anatomy course, possibly.
Oh, perhaps I should.
So, alright, today we have a little follow-up to a video we did last week about the PlayStation. The thing with this is, I'm sure that the title of this will be something a little bit alarmist, because it actually is. This is not a clickbait thing. There is a lot of talk about the PS3, but not only the PS3, also the PlayStation 4 now. So, if you're one of the people who says, well, the PlayStation 3 was worthless anyway. It had its time. This is how things happen. You need to move on, which I've actually seen comments like that, which I think are misguided, although I understand. You know, everything does have its season. Every person dies. Everything gets old. I get it. But the thing with digital media is it doesn't have to.
I was going to say game preservation is extremely important in my opinion.
Yeah. It doesn't have to get old.
I don't think it has to. No, I think it's really important, especially for the gaming industry, because you can learn a lot from these older games and forward your technology because of it.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that a lot of people miss that, you know.
And your storytelling.
Yeah,
too.
you can. I mean, there's a lot of things you can look or learn by going back and looking at something like Final Fantasy VII, and there's a reason why it was popular when it came to Steam and when it was, you know, ported to PS4 and Xbox One and stuff like that. But the thing is, this is not just about the PS3 anymore, because there was a potential issue with the CMOS battery on the PlayStation 3, which I'll explain. However, we found out from a lot of reputable sources, including reputable tech hacker Lance McDonald. I'm calling him Tech Hacker. He's a well-known tech dude. Lots of people follow him.
I like his name.
And Does It Play on Twitter, along with tons of other reports from people on YouTube, such as small channels like Hikikomori Media, which you should check out if you don't follow him. He's really good. He's even a smaller channel, I think, than ours, and we're tiny. You know, Some Ordinary Gamers talked about this. I saw Radical Reggie talked about it. I think Mystic talked about it. All kinds of people are talking about this. So this is not just a Jay's an alarmist thing. But what we found out is that the CMOS battery issue that was a potential problem in the PS3 is not only a potential problem, it is a replicatable error that actually happens. And let me explain this real quick, because there's a lot of explanations of what the CMOS battery is. It is essentially a battery powering a piece of the inside of your PlayStation 3 and 4. And I'm simplifying it to all hell because it's very confusing, and I don't think that getting really technical with this helps anybody.
And I think a lot of people would very much so appreciate it if you just put it a little bit smaller, because not everyone's a tech geek, you know?
The thing is, you put batteries in your controllers, and you can replace those, right?
Xbox runs on batteries.
Well, apparently the inside of PlayStations do, too. Because there's pieces of your motherboard or your logic board or all these different things in your computer. These are computers. They're simplified computers, the consoles, that need a small battery part to run. This CMOS battery essentially regulates the internal clock of the PS3 and the PS4. And you might look at me and you say, Jay, you're just a disembodied voice. How am I looking at you? But also, you can change your clock on your PS3 and your PS4. You can, but you can't change your internal clock on the PS4 or PS3 without jailbreaking and hacking the system. It is an invisible thing inside your PlayStation that essentially stays hooked up to a consistent time in order to prevent you from doing something like going online, buying 50 platinum trophies, unlocking them all at 11:01 a.m. 2021 April 10th. You know what I mean? It's to prevent you from doing that. The idea is essentially for trophy support, to regulate cheating, and essentially verify that you own what you're doing.
And isn't it also supposed to help the piracy thing?
Yes, because the thing with the internal clock staying consistent and all of this, I mean, it's very complicated, and I don't want to get too far into that road because I might get a little confused myself or confusing to them. But it's essentially the idea that once you jailbreak your PS3 or PS4, you can essentially fiddle with these things because you're basically in dev kit mode almost in a way, or like debug mode, like how they give developers for games a dev kit PlayStation and they say, hey, look, you have access to all the internal components and you know all the coding of how everything runs so you make your game run, you can essentially do that yourself. It's like when you jailbreak your phone, how you'll always see, oh, jailbroken iPhone, you know, so I can buy this thing that was apparently sold by Verizon and get it to run on AT&T, stuff like that. The point of preventing jailbreaking is not because it's illegal, although there was a huge thing about that years ago, because you own the system. You can do what you want with it. It's kind of like tricking out a car. That's up to you. But they want to prevent you from doing that because once you've jailbroken a system, it's extremely easy to emulate software on it illegally. Things that you don't own. Backups of games, essentially, that you don't own. So, like, for example, at the moment, I don't own Chrono Trigger. I could very easily buy it right now as a PS1 classic on PlayStation 3 digitally, or I could go buy a disc. But if I download that game illegally without owning it, at least in the United States with copyright law, that is illegal.
Yeah.
And they want to prevent you from having easy access to do that. The problem is that in order to fix these issues, you would have to do that. And what do these issues actually cause? That's, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. That's kind of the crux of this whole thing. On the PS3, if this CMOS battery dies, you can no longer play digital games you own. On the PlayStation 4, if it dies, at least according to Lance McDonald and Does It Play and many other reputable channels, along with a lot of different games outlets online, it will actually render the licenses for your PlayStation 4 discs essentially null and void in terms of not reading them on that console. So what it will do is it will not only on the PS3 make it so you can't play digital games that you own, on the PS4 it will make it so you can't play digital or physical games that you own, because these discs we're finding, they act more and more like a key to play the game the further along we get. However, they still do have the data on them. The problem is that if you are playing them on a PS4 in the future, if you cannot either connect to the PlayStation Network or have that CMOS battery running because it's the backup, you know, that keeps the time, you can't play these games. And that's really problematic in terms of game preservation, but also in terms of what you paid for, because essentially this will render every single PlayStation 4 at some point to be a dead paperweight. You will not only be able to not play digital, but also your physical discs. You'd have to play them through backwards compatibility on a PS5 or through a PS4 that still has the CMOS battery. This is if PlayStation Network's connection ever permanently goes down to your hardware, your PS3 or your PS4, not just the store. They have to sever the whole thing. But you pointed out to me, Jill, when we were talking, that once they can, the store for the PS3, they're now no longer making, you know, that money off the PS3 store. Why should they keep that network up forever? It's just a drain.
Yeah, exactly. And the same thing's going to happen with the PS4 store, and then eventually the PS5 store. Like, think about it. 20 years from now, we could have a kid or something who wants to play, like, PS4 games, but they won't be able to because, you know, the PlayStation Network will be gone and will be on the PS, friggin', I don't know, 9.
Yeah, and I think that the problem is that I think this is planned obsolescence in a way.
I agree. I think it's definitely planned to make the PS4 a time bomb.
Yeah, because the issue with this is essentially we know games are trying to be pushed towards streaming. You know, they want to make the Netflix of games. That's really what they want. That's what PS Now is. That's what, in a way, Game Pass is. And yes, sometimes those things can be good deals, but PS Now isn't where it needs to be. Game Pass is a very good deal, but still people have a place for physical. The issue with this is that it essentially makes it so that what you purchased isn't usable by you eventually. And if you say, well, you can just use it on a PS5 in the future. You know, like if you have a PS4 game, if I have Sonic Mania on PS4 and I want to play it in the future, I can just play it on PS5. Yes, you're right. But at the time of this recording, April 9th, there isn't a lot of actual evidence in terms of if this CMOS battery issue will be an issue in the future for the PS5. People don't actually understand how the PS5 is built well enough yet to know about this. You have to realize the people taking these things apart and figuring this out, they're hobbyists. They're people who go to a job during the day. You know, they don't do this for money. They do this because they love game preservation and all this stuff. This is why, again, when you're someone who says, just emulate it, just emulate Metal Gear Solid 4 if you can't play it on PS4 or you can't play it on PS5 and eventually you couldn't play it on PS3. You know, you can't do that easily.
I wanted to interject. There's also the issue where all of these games are eventually not going to be able to be backwards compatible. Tell me which Nintendo system you can play a Game Boy game on right now.
Right. None. I mean, you could buy the Retron.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, like, that's not a Nintendo system. It's a third-party
Or
thing.
you can buy the original Nintendo DS. That's it.
For the Game Boy Advance. Yeah, I mean, it's a problem because backwards compatibility only goes back so far. You know, you're right. Like, the Switch, the only backwards compatibility is stuff you buy on their store. Like, there's some, SNES and some small stuff like that. That is a problem because the PS4, and Mutahar in Some Ordinary Gamers in his video points this out, this was like the first time PlayStation developed a system where you couldn't play PS1 games on it, even though it was very capable of doing that. Any of these systems can essentially be powerful enough to emulate the generation before it, especially if it's set up by the people who made the game, or by the people who made that hardware. Because, trust me, Sony would know how to get a PlayStation 3 emulator running a lot faster than we all would together if they cared. Like things like PCSX3 that has been tinkered with over and over and over again to get Metal Gear Solid 4 running perfectly. First, Snake showed up as invisible all the time. Then textures wouldn't load. Then it was stuck in like 15 FPS for a year. All this stuff. It was all these growing pains for one freaking game to get it to run perfectly. And even now, you're not going to emulate that game well unless you have like state-of-the-art, top-tier graphics card, motherboard, processor, all this stuff.
You should probably mention this is for the PC, if you emulate it on the PC.
Yeah, you'd have to emulate it on the PC with tons of stuff. Like, you're talking, probably a few $1,000 rig. Yeah. To basically emulate these PS3 games.
They recently got that game running when it came out like 10 years ago, you said.
Yeah.
So, they
got running good.
It's not easy to emulate whatever game you want. You can't just pop open the CD thing on your computer and put in, whatever disc you want, like a PS4 disc, and call it a day. It doesn't work.
No, a few years ago, there were still issues emulating GameCube and PlayStation 2. A few years ago. Now, since then, pretty much smooth sailing perfect. But these things are constantly lagging 5 to 10 years behind in terms of what they can do. And your computer, because it's not designed to run these things, needs to be a powerhouse to make up for the fact that it wasn't built to run that game. That game was built for something else. You're essentially running a machine inside of a machine, and you have to get that original machine. The machine inside the machine has to work better than the original machine to play it. Yeah. That's not easy to do. That's why emulation is a difficult thing to do and why it's actually very important for game preservation. But this whole thing really frustrates me because it feels like this is on purpose. I could buy that the PS3 one's a glitch, or that it wasn't thought about when they built this thing, because clearly they didn't have this issue with PS1 or PS2. I could buy that, this was not thought about well, especially because discs still run. Yeah. But I can't really buy that with PS4. Like, you're telling me that the same company made this, put the same type of CMOS battery in here, and then also made it so you had to have the internal clock synced to play these physical games, basically, once you update something, blah, 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 blah.
It wasn't just an oversight. It was purposeful, in my opinion.
I think so, too. I don't know how you would make this oversight, especially for, a $1 billion corporation like Sony who knows how to make computers.
Geniuses who make things,
Yeah. They know it a lot better than we do. Yeah. It's just very frustrating to look at, and it's very possible that these things could be addressed and fixed. There could be an end-of-life update for PS3 to make it so that if I buy Klonoa or Silent Hill 1 or Metal Gear Solid VR missions on PS3 through the PS Classic program on PS... Geez, there's too many PSs. The PlayStation Store. They could make it so that even if that CMOS battery was dead and the PlayStation Network was completely terminated to PS3 across the network, they could release an update before that would make it so that if I downloaded that update before that network was terminated, my machine could always play those games. However, if a machine didn't download that before, that happened, and then the network went down and you couldn't download it, that would be a pain in the ass. And also, this whole thing encourages jailbreaking your system. And in a way...
encourages piracy.
I really think it does encourage piracy in a roundabout way because, one, you sort of create an attitude in the consumer about this stuff. Why should I give you my money if you're going to snatch the thing away? Yeah. Especially because if you look at the EULA, the EULA that we all sign by using these systems... you basically give them the right to terminate your usage of software at any time. You know, if they wrote that in there, and why would they write that in there if they didn't plan to ever do it? I mean,
It's wrong of them, in my opinion. I mean, to be fair, you signed the agreement, but we only signed the agreement because we wanted to play games.
Right, and there's no other place to go. I mean...
Yeah, there's no other option.
The idea about capitalism and also competition, not to get into an economics lesson and be preachy, is the idea of there's somewhere better to go. You know, like if the EULA's bad, go here. The EULAs all suck ass.
Yep.
They're all bad. Have you read any of them? They're all horrendous. None of them are good.
Nobody reads those things anyway because they're like 25 pages long.
No, but if you read them, they all say basically we can shut down your access to our games and like suck our dick.
Yeah.
Yeah, because basically the idea is essentially that they write that in there so if you're a cheater, like if I go on Overwatch and I have an aimbot, they can remove me, right? The problem is it doesn't just apply to cheaters, it applies to whoever they want. You know, like if I jailbreak my PS3 right now and I go online with it, they terminate that console's connection to the internet and I can't access it. So like
permanently?
Yes, you could kind of if you know someone who knows what they're doing, which I don't well enough, essentially if that happened, I believe that you could still go in there, change some stuff, reset it to factory defaults, go back online and they wouldn't know it's the same PlayStation 3. But that's why a lot of people don't want to risk jailbreaking their systems right now when they can still connect to the internet unless they want to pirate games. So really what you're doing now by doing this is if you ever terminate this connection to the PS3 or PS4, you are encouraging people to jailbreak those consoles and use them as emulation machines. And instead of giving you money, instead of giving you $10 for Mega Man Legends 2, which is otherwise over $100 physical, you know, and Capcom and PlayStation getting that money, now I should just steal it. That's essentially what you're telling me or anyone else, you know, and I'm not advocating you go do that. I'm not saying, hey, steal games. I'm just saying they're advocating for it.
Here's the thing, though. If there is no other option, is it really stealing? You know?
The law says it is, but morally, I don't really think so, but that's them.
If you don't have the option to buy it and you want to buy it, you want to give your money to them, but they aren't giving you the option, who's to say you can't take it?
Right. Though then that's the issue, is that it very quickly encourages piracy and very quickly encourages all this stuff. I was having a conversation with my mom about this just briefly earlier about like how people used to pirate movies and torrent movies. Some people still do, but overwhelmingly a lot of people it's not worth their time anymore because guess what? If I can pay $20 a month, you know, and get Netflix and Disney Plus and I have access to hundreds of movies, most of them I would want to, you know, steal would probably be on one of those. Mm-hmm. The idea is essentially that they make it so convenient to get stuff that there's no point to pirate. This is the opposite of that. This is making it so inconvenient to play things you legally purchased that you might as well steal them in a lot of cases. And that's bad. I mean,
it's backwards.
Yeah, and you know, there are legitimate things you could do. Like, for example, you could jailbreak one of these systems and mess with the internal clock and just play the games you bought legally. You know, that's not illegal. Mm-hmm. Like, there was a lot of fight over like the jailbreaking consoles years ago, and is this legal? Is it not? It's essentially been agreed upon since then, and that as long as you are not stealing games or stealing software, hey man, you bought it. It's like tricking out a car. They can terminate your connection to online if you go on with it, because otherwise you could be shoving your Call of Duty character through walls and shooting people with headshots again through the floor, and cheating. But you can, you know, mess with that on your own, and there are legitimate ways to do that to keep the games you bought. But the problem is that they're not just encouraging that. Once you've done that, it's so easy to just take the games that they're essentially encouraging people to do so, yeah. I believe. I think that's a problem. I think this is bad for game preservation. It's an awful look for PlayStation. Xbox gets so much shit for things that they do, but like, come on, really? Like, this is awful. And there have been talks about there being CMOS issues with the Xbox consoles as well. So I'm not excusing them, but what I'm saying is like, this needs to pick up steam. People should be more concerned about this, more upset. You pay for these things. You should be able to own them as long as you do.
If you make a big enough stink about them, maybe they'll change it.
Yeah, that's all I'm asking for. I don't, you know, like, I don't sit here and expect like Jonathan Sony, the leader of Sony, that's not really anyone's name, to come in and, you know, issue a public apology. I don't care about that. What I just want is sort of end of life updates for these game systems that make it so that if that internal clock goes out, you can't get trophies, right? But you could still play the game. That's all I want.
I think that's really important too.
That's it. You purchase the license to play the game. Let them play the game.
Yeah.
I get they don't own the IP, but like, come on. We're going to render discs unreadable now?
I just think that's so wrong. I mean, what are they going to be the point of all of the discs behind us? Are we just going to use them as mantelpieces like the mean people in your comments as kneecaps?
Well, that's kind of what I wonder if they want. You know, like if you render all physical useless, then even the holdouts like me that love physical, it's like they hit a point where it's like, what's the point? Why am I buying this? It's going to be worthless someday. I might as well just stream the game.
Yeah.
And I kind of wonder in a way if that's the point. I'm very frustrated by this, very disappointed in PlayStation. Jill, do you have anything to add before we wrap this up? Because I kind of can drone on forever about it.
I guess I'm a little bit disappointed with how PlayStation and just game systems in general are kind of being made these days with that kind of self-time bomb being a thought in their head and being put into these systems. It makes me sad because I love games, you know, and there's a ton of games that I played as a little kid that I'm sure a few generations from now there's going to be a ton of games that people have played on the PS4 that they loved when they were little kids, but they won't be able to play them anymore. And that's not fair. I mean, if I wanted to right now, I could probably get a Game Boy off of eBay and play some Game Boy games that I played as a kid and enjoy myself thoroughly and have nostalgia. But people in the future aren't going to be able to do that sort of thing. And I just kind of think it's wrong. And I think it's kind of taking people's money. And it feels just dishonest.
It does feel dishonest because it's essentially selling you a machine, but it's almost like a rental.
Yeah.
You know, like, oh, well, this won't work after a certain time period. And then when you're buying them, it's like, well, why am I buying these? Like, why don't I just buy a PC then and just not play these exclusives?
Yeah.
I mean, the exclusives are good, but it's going to push people away from consoles. It's going to push people away from PlayStation, I think, as well. And yes, a lot of people won't leave because they're lazy. I mean, that's what it comes down to. They're lazy,
or because
they don't like change, or they don't know. There's a lot of people like that, but I do think that this is a problem. I think it's a big enough deal that people should be talking about it, and it's extremely frustrating that this is not something that people can really hold them to task for.
And we should all become Karens about it and go into Sony's forums and yell at them.
Well, I don't think yelling at them helps, but I do think that talking about it does. Let us know what you think in the comments down below. What do you think about all this? What are your thoughts on the CMOS battery? You know, it's very interesting because I had seen a lot of people say, well, if you just replace the CMOS battery, won't that work? But in a lot of the test cases, you know, once that CMOS battery was dead, even if you replaced it, unless it could connect again to PSN to verify, it still wouldn't work. So it's not as simple as just replacing the CMOS. There's so much here. I really think it encourages, you know, jailbreaking and, you know, by an extension, piracy. And it's bad for everybody. It's bad for game preservation, bad for history, and it's bad for, you know, just being able to play a game that came out forever ago.
And in my opinion, it's bad for the gaming industry entirely.
Yeah, this kills a lot of trust.
Yeah.
You know, as someone who's been buying PlayStation since PS2, this kind of makes me not like them more.
Yeah.
Which I don't like to
but
say.
We're still going to play on their system.
I'm sure, yeah. Let us know what you think in the comments down below. Be sure to leave a like if you enjoyed it, a dislike it if you dislike it. As always, I really need that engagement. I don't care if you're a hater. Just please give me the engagement. Let me know what you think. See you in the next one. Have a fantastic day. As always,
stay shway.